Please remember there are additional resources and things such as code samples at elithecomputerguy.com. So if you're watching one of these classes and you need to know what code looks like, or if you need links to the resources that we're using, please go to elithecomputerguy.com and take a look at our class posting there. Also, please remember that free to the end user classes are not actually free. It costs me a lot of money to be able to provide this type of content. So if you could click on the donate button and throw in a couple of dollars every month, this will help me be able to continue to provide you this type of material. Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, and in today's class, we're going to be going over REST APIs, the request module, and parsing JSON in Python. So the first thing that we need to talk about is what is a REST API. So one of the topics you'll hear me talk a lot about in these classes is the type of architecture that you are using for whatever project that you are trying to create. And one of the architecture types is something called service-oriented architecture. And so what service-oriented architecture means is you have your little platform, you have your little server, and your server will reach out to other services to make requests for certain types of information or resources. So in order to be able to make those requests, there's a number of different methods for being able to do that. One of the methods for having a server be able to go out and basically get information from other servers is something called REST. And so what REST is you actually go to a URL. So I can't really blow this up for you here, but this is actually just a standard URL up here, ip-api.com, JSON, and what my IP address is. So basically, you can just plug this in to a normal web browser, and then you are then presented with information. So you are actually presented with a web page, right? So if you want to read the news, you go to CNN.com or Fox.com or whatever else, and you see a page with multimedia information, videos, images, that type of thing. Well, if you need information from a server, you can go to a web address, and that server can provide you just the information that you need, generally in what is called a JSON data type, right? So if we take a look at this here, right, so I feed it what my IP address is, and this is a geolocation API. So you say what your IP address is, and then it gives you a whole bunch of information about your particular IP address. So it says status, so success, basically this query worked. The country that I'm in is the United States. The country code is the US. Region, I'm actually using a VPN right now. So the region is Florida, region name Florida, city is Miami. It gives me the zip code, the latitude, the longitude, the time zone, ISP, and a whole bunch of information, right? So again, think about this. If I need the news, I'm going to go to CNN.com. If I need particular information, I will go use a REST API. So this is one REST API that provides you location information based off of your IP address. Now, if I need my IP address, so basically I just need to know what my external IP address is, I can go to another REST API called api.ipify.org. If I go there, I will simply get text that will tell me what my external IP address is. So again, I might need this for the project that I'm doing. And then another REST API that we have here, this is actually from the National Weather Service, and this is weather alerts. So let's say for some reason I wanted to know what weather alerts there were for an area that I'm in, or an area that I may have a business in. Again, this is a JSON output, and with all of this information here, it will tell you what's going on, and it will give you a format that you can parse and deal with Python. So an area description, Jefferson, Florida. Let's see, affected zones. It tells you the affected zones. We have a headline, flood warning issue December 4 at 10:14. We have a description, minor flooding is occurring and minor flooding is forecast. Response, avoid, a whole bunch of information here. And so when you start taking a look at this, I think this kind of gives you an idea about that whole concept of parsing that I've talked about before. So what parsing is where your script is able to read a document of some sort and then be able to pull out the information that it needs. Well, if you have a JSON format with something like a REST API, this is all formatted in a specific way so that you know how to pull the data out. That's one of the things I'll show you in this class today. So I could make a request from this REST API, and then I could say, what region am I in? And I could just pull out simply that I'm in Florida. Like if for some reason I need to know what region I'm in, I can go through a little script and pull out specifically Florida. Again, if I wanted to come here and pull out specific headlines, I'll show you how to do the Python scripting today. So we can come and we can find, I need the headline, I need the description, I need the event, I need specific information. And in this JSON format, it allows us to parse that information relatively easily. So this is what we're talking about with REST APIs and then JSON. And so basically what we're able to do is we're able to go to a standard URL. So this is just, again, with this is just a normal web browser. This is Safari. I have a URL here. Basically, when I go to that URL, I get a web page that is formatted for JSON or something along those lines instead of being formatted for you to look at like the news. And then I'm able to pull this information in and then use this information within my scripts. And I'm able to do that with the request module. So now let's take a second to see what the request module does, right? So this is my normal web browser. I've gone to api.ipfy.org and it has provided me with my external IP address. This is nice and all, but this is not actually useful for me if I'm trying to build my own system. I want to be able to grab this information in Python and then do something with it. So if we go over and we take a look at this code will allow us to go to that REST API, be able to pull that text information, and then assign it to a value of a variable. And again, the important thing to understand in programming is once you can assign text to a value of a variable, you can do a whole bunch of fancy things, right? When you simply have a picture and you're trying to figure out what to do with a picture, that's hard. That is what we call hard. Here's the thing. If you have an API, a computer vision API, that will look at your picture and then will give you back in a JSON format what that computer vision sees in your picture, you will receive text back. Well, dealing with text is incredibly easy. Again, if you have an audio file, having your computer deal with a pure audio file is difficult. If you have some kind of service that gives you the transcript, the text transcript of that audio file, dealing with text, ASCII text, is really, really, really easy, right? Again, that's one of the importance with APIs, and again, why service-oriented architecture is so useful in the modern world. So with this, we're going to use the requests module. So the request module is built into Python 3. You're not going to need to use pip or do anything fancy. You're simply going to import requests. That's all you're going to do. Then for IP address, so what we're going to want here is we're going to want the IP address. So we're going to say IP address equals the request module, the get function, .get, the get function, and then we are going to feed it the URL for where we're going to. One of the important things here, and I'll show you this in other labs, is you can have an F string here to have components of this URL be dynamic, or again, if it doesn't need to be dynamic, you just put the whole thing there. And then at the end, this here, we have .text, right? So when we do the get function, so the request module, the get function, we are going to get the information from ipfy.org. The important thing to understand is that that's going to come back as an object. And so if you print it out, it is simply going to print out object plus some other information that you don't really care about. I don't really want an object. I need the actual value itself. So text, not txt, text, text. When you do that, one of the attributes of the object that's getting created with get is the text that you're bringing in. There's also headers. There's a whole bunch of different attributes that you pull in when you use get. We're not going to worry about those today because that gets a little complicated and most of the time you don't need them. But one of the attributes is simply the text, and so that's all we want, right? The request module get this URL and then give me the text that I'm receiving back, and that's going to be assigned to IP address. Now you'll notice here why I say text is because this is only text. This is only text. There's no JSON. So when we talk about JSON, and again, we'll deal with JSON more in a little bit, JSON basically looks like a dictionary, or it looks like a multi-layer dictionary list scheme. We'll go into that later. But this is what JSON normally looks like. With this, we're just getting back text. So 64.31.43.120. So we want that text. We want to assign it to the value of IP address, and then we're going to simply print out the IP address. We do this, and we're going to see 64.31.43.120, right? Which should be the same as there, right? So I'm able to go out to this URL. I'm able to bring back the information. I'm able to get the text attributes, and then I'm able to print it out or do whatever it is that I want with it. And this is a very basic example of what you can do with the request module. Now here's another example of what you can do with the request module. So with this, again, we're still using the text attribute. So we're going to go to a web page, and then we want to pull just the text out of it. Now, one of the things that you'll hear about in the coding world is you hear about web scraping, right? So what web scraping is you create your little bot. It goes out to all the different websites, all the different web pages, basically reads through those websites and web pages to grab information. So you may see this where sometimes the security isn't proper on some kind of data document on a web page, and somebody will go in and scrape all of the email addresses of users who use that particular web page. The other thing that you can do is you can actually copy an entire web page essentially and store it for offline viewing. We're actually going to have some classes on that using another module called Beautiful Soup, and that will be for a different day. But I wanted to just show you that, again, you don't just have to use this for REST APIs. You can use this for normal web pages even. So with this, we're going to import the request module. And then what I want to do here is I actually just want to copy everything on this particular web page. So there's a web page called arstechnica.com, Information Technology 2023-11, Sam Altman officially back as OpenAI CEO. We didn't lose a single employee. And I want to pull basically all of the data from that web page. I'm then going to print that out, all of it, so all the JavaScript, all the HTML, all the CSS, that's going to get printed out down at the command line down here. But also what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy everything that I pull out of this web page and write it to my own HTML document that will sit in my root directory. So this is a little script. So let's say you want to copy web pages or web documentation and save them to your computer so that you can deal with them later for whatever reasons that you want to deal with them later. Basically with this, you're able to scrape this web page and you're able to save it to your computer. So again, so you have it for some type of offline viewing. So again, import requests, page equals request, so the request module, .get function. This is the entire page that I'm going for. I want the text attribute. I will then print out everything that's within page. So that'll all come down here. That'll just be HTML and CSS and everything else. Then what I'm going to do is with open, I'm going to open ars-copy.html. So this will be a copy of this web page. This is going to be stored in my user root directory since I'm not using join or anything else. So I'll show you that, but that'll just be my Eli directory. W for overwrite as file, and then file.write everything that's in there for page. So if I go and run this, basically I run this, it went out to Ars Technica, and you can see lots and lots and lots and lots of text, right? You can see there's an end of a script here. You can see the JavaScript functions. You can see all kinds of things, right? So if you wanted to do a basic scraping technique, let's say you could do a request, grab this web page, and then maybe look for all of the URLs in that web page for something that you're going to deal with. Or again, you can grab this entire web page and you can put it through OpenAI to ask questions about the particular web page, or make a summary of the particular web page, that type of deal. So basically, this is what it is. If you understand CSS and HTML and JavaScript and how all that works, basically all you're looking at here is that. But the cool part is, again, with this rs_copy.html, if we go over here, again, this is my root directory, my user root directory. We can see rs-copy.html was created. If I double click on this, look at that. Isn't that pretty? If you look at here, again, I don't know how to zoom this so you can actually see it. It says file://users Eli rs-copy.html. So this is not coming from arstechnica.com. This is simply that HTML document I opened on my own computer. And so I can sit here, Sam Altman officially back as OpenAI CEO, and I can come and I can read this document. Now again, if you don't know HTML and CSS and JavaScript, there's a whole bunch of linking. So if you take this offline, like if I'm not actually online, this might be a little weird. Let me go offline. Let me go offline and see what happens. So if I go oh, really? Well, maybe it's cached. Anyways, just do realize if you were completely 100% offline, some of this stuff might not show up because it's making requests, right? There's links, image, SRC links, there's links out. But again, the text and all of that kind of thing should be there. And so this is one of the cool things that you can do with the request module is basically you can use it to scrape web pages of many different types and then save that onto your computer or into your specific data store. So now we get into some JSON. So this is really cool. So this is basically the data structure that is generally used for APIs in order to basically transmit data on the internet. You make a request, you get a JSON response back, you parse that JSON response for whatever it is that you want. The other interesting thing about this particular lab is we're starting to build on what we did before. Again, that's a big thing to be thinking about whenever you're building your project is you're going to have to probably go through multiple steps to get the final resource that you need. So what we're looking for right now is I want location information. So at the end of this, I want to print what city that I'm in and what state that I'm in. But I need a couple of things in order to do that, right? So this is the API call that we're going to be making to ip-api.com, and this is going to give our region information that should have us in Miami, Florida, so on and so forth. Oops, let me make sure my connection is back on, so my VPN connection is back on, right? So I want to be able to find out what city I'm in. I want to be able to figure out what region I'm in. But in order to get here, I actually have to give it my external IP address. So that's where we have to use this, right? We used the request module before to get my external IP address. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my external IP address. Once I have that, I'm then going to make a request from this API with my external IP address that is then going to provide me all of this information. And then once I have all of this information, I'm going to figure out what city and state that I'm in. So let's take a look at this. So import request. So we're importing that request module. IP address equals request.get, right? ipfi.org, and the text attribute. That's the text attribute. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say location equals request.get. We're going to do an F string. So the F string allows us to create a dynamic string. And so we're going to put in the value for IP address here. So as I move around or as I use different VPNs or whatever, it'll be a different thing that gets put there. And then the end of it, right? .text is the attribute before, we're going to use the .json method. So what this is going to do, the .json method, is going to format the object that we're getting back into a JSON value. So one of the important things to understand in Python is if you don't have the right data type, then the rest of it's not going to work properly, right? So if you have a string, this is one of the things to just realize, if you have a string that looks like this, you can't interact with it as if it's JSON. Python has to know this is JSON. So you can have text that looks identical to this, but is defined as a string, as a data type of a string, and you won't be able to interact with it. You have to tell it that it's JSON in order to be able to interact with it. And so that is what we are doing here, is we're saying get get that object back, and then give me the text as a JSON value. I'm then going to print the IP address. I'm then going to print everything that comes back for location. And then down here, I'm going to print, so again, F string, city, location, city, state, location, region name. Again, remember with the double quotation marks, single quotation marks here, I open this with a double quotation mark and close with a double quotation mark so that when I'm getting, right, these indexes, I can do the single quotation marks in here and I don't run into any problems. So let me just run this so you get a little bit of an idea what's going on, right? So I do this, right? Okay, so request IP address location. Print IP address. So my IP address is 64.31.25.135, right? As we did before. And then here, right, print location. So this is the JSON value that we have gotten back. Again, just like I showed you on the web page, country equals United States, country code equals US, region equals Florida, region name is Florida, city is Miami, zip code is 33102, so on and so forth. Now, what if I want the specific values out of here? I just want the zip code, or as I showed you, I just want the city. At that point, think of it like a dictionary, right? We talked about dictionaries before with sets. And basically with this, so we have location, right? So up here, location equals request.get, and we get that JSON value. So location is all of the JSON value. So we simply say location, square bracket, single quotation mark, city. So this says, I want this value, which is Miami. Again, if I want state, location, region name, if I come down here, region name is Florida. And so that's how I'm able to pull the specific JSON values out that I need. Again, if you're troubleshooting, if you're trying to figure out what is going on here, like you try this and it doesn't work for you, do make sure that you're getting an IP address. That might be a problem for you. Do make sure you're getting the location, that this doesn't fail for some reason. And then also verify you have the .json here, right? So if you don't put JSON at all, then basically you're just going to get an object value back, and then it'll fail. It won't work properly. If you're just forgetting what you're doing and you do .text instead of .json, it will come back as a string data type. And then when you try to actually grab these values, it will fail because it's a string, not a JSON object, right? So those are some of the troubleshooting issues that you might run into. But this is the basic idea of how JSON works with these REST APIs. Now, one of the big issues that we run into in the programming world, and really in the technology world as technology professionals, is we know what we're trying to accomplish. We're just not really sure what the hell we're supposed to type in, right? That's a big problem. You're like, I'm really smart. I know exactly what I need to do. Ah, crap, I just forget the commands. Again, this is one of the reasons I'm a proponent for standardization, right? If you're using Linux in your infrastructure, I would argue, except for where you need to, you should always use the same distributions and the same versions of Linux so that when somebody sits down, they know how to get the IP address, they know how to do, basic functions and maintenance tasks and that type of thing, right? If you have some CentOS boxes and some Mint boxes and some, all the different flavors of Linux out there boxes, one of the problems you can really run into is you sit down and you're like, well, I know exactly what I want to do. I just forget the syntax for this machine. Again, Debian is a major fork away from the Red Hat world. So literally, if you're used to using Debian and you sit down and you're at a Red Hat machine and you simply need to install something, that might be a lot of Googling and time that you'll have to waste that you weren't expecting. And so one of the big problems you run into too in like the programming world is many times you know what you want. Right? You know what it is that you're looking for. You know what you want to have happen based off of the value that you're looking for. But crap, there's just a whole bunch of words, right? You're just looking at this page and it is so many words, right? And so with this, right, that example that I just showed you, we pull the JSON and basically we print out, and this is the JSON value that gets printed out. And this is relatively simple. This is relatively easy to take a look at. But even with this, this can be a bit of a pain in the butt. It's like, again, what do you call city for this JSON response? Or interesting, like, again, the issue that you can have, like Florida, right? This is the state. This is the state. So if you're thinking, oh, I want the state. So I want to put in, when I'm printing something out, I want to put in location and I want to put in state because I'm looking for the state. So I want the value for state. Well, if you look here at this JSON, the value, the key for state is region name, right? And so you may have to go through and scan through this information, again, just to figure out like the keys that you're looking for so that you can pull out those values. So wouldn't it be nicer if you could make this prettier? And that's one of the things that you can actually do using something called the JSON module, right? So we import request as we did before. We import the JSON module, JSON module. Again, this is built into Python 3. You do not need to use pip or anything else. What we're able to do is we're actually going to be able to use the JSON module, the dumps function, to dump the location value, right? This location value, and basically make it look pretty. So what we're going to do is we're going to dump the location value. For every index or whatever, we're going to indent by 2, and then we're going to print this out on the screen. So just to show you, if I run this, right, so I run this, up here, right, this is the original JSON value that we're dealing with. That works completely fine, again, but it might be difficult for you to figure out what's going on. This is what it looks like when we prettify. It's called prettifying the JSON, right? So here, it's much easier to see. Okay, status, country, country code, region, region name, city, zip code, latitude. And so by prettifying the JSON data, it makes it a lot easier for you to figure out what keys it is that you're looking for, especially when we get to the national weather alert JSON response. That'll make a lot more sense when we start seeing something that gets a lot more complicated. Again, imagine all of this just being lumped into one big block and trying to figure out what value you want. This right here is actually prettified so that you can read it and have an idea of what's going on. So anyways, with this, let's take a look at this for a second. So we do import requests, import JSON, JSON. Again, both built-in modules, you simply import them here. IP address, as we did before, we get the text for the IP address. Location, as we did before, and we get the JSON. Do remember to get that JSON for the location. We're going to print out, what we're going to print out that entire JSON response. We're going to see that as a block, and then we're going to make it pretty. So we're going to say location underscore pretty equals JSON module dumps function. We're going to feed it location. We're going to feed it location. And then for every line or whatever, it'll get indented by 2. So you get to indent this by 1, you get to indented by 20. We're just going to say indented by 2. And then we're going to print out location, the prettified location. Again, when we do this, we now see this prettified location. One of the interesting things here, again, to be careful about, is when we create this, the JSON dumps, this is actually creating a string data type. So it's going through, it's reading that JSON object, and then based off of that, it is actually outputting a string data type. So an important thing to understand is you can use this pretty information, this prettified information, in order to get an idea of what the JSON looks like. You do not actually interact with that as the JSON. The location remains the JSON object that you're interacting with. This is simply pretty, right? So basically, if you do location underscore pretty, you do this dump, and then you try to pull a value from location underscore pretty. So let's say if I try to do this, right? If I try to do city, right? So this is the prettified. Will that work? And when I go to run this, right, string indices must be integers, not string, right? So basically, this is a failure because it is a string. If I do simply location city, so location is JSON. If I do that, hopefully, There we go. We get Miami down here. So that's one of the things that can kind of screw you up with this whole prettifying deal is you use the prettifying, you use the dumps to get an idea of what the hell the JSON is actually saying. But when you're interacting with the JSON, you still have to use the original JSON object. This is a string. This is JSON. Be careful of that. So now let's take a look at the final lab. So at the end of it, for this final lab, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to loop through. So we're actually going to do a 4x loop, and we're going to be looking for all weather alerts for a specific state. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be printing out what the headline for the alert is and what the description of the alert is, and that's what we're going to be doing at the end. This should be dynamic, so basically this will be based off of my current external IP address. We're going to feed that into location and go from there. So if you have a VPN, you can switch around again from Florida to North Carolina or wherever else. If you want to figure out where not to buy a house, this is a great way to do it. It's kind of funny, like, because when I use just my normal IP address, again, I don't care. I'm at Hatch Innovation Hub. The external IP address here is the external IP address for the entire building, so I don't really care. But the interesting thing is, when I use the external IP address that's in North Carolina, I get no alerts. None. It's like, well, I would show you the alerts, but North Carolina is pretty damn safe. What can I say? We don't have a lot of weather events here. What's funny is whenever I plug in Florida, oh my God, you get so many pages of weather alerts. So again, something to think about, real solutions, solving problems. You're thinking about moving someplace. Hey, take a look at how many weather alerts that state has versus another state you're looking at, and you might want to go to the place where the property insurance is a hell of a lot less. So anyway, so this is dynamic. So we'll flip this around a little bit so you can see that dynamism in action. I'm going to walk you through this. Again, it might be a little complicated to fully understand. Just kind of understand that this does work, and we are going to be doing much more work with requests and JSON and all this going into the future. So if you don't fully understand it, don't worry. we're going to deal with a lot more of this. So with this, we're going to import requests as we do. We're going to import JSON as we do. And so we're going to use this because we are going to need to figure out this information, right? If this information from the National Weather Alert API is just a big old block, again, look at. Do you want, like, it's one thing, like you're like, Eli, that doesn't need to be pretty. You're right. This doesn't need to be pretty. But if you're trying to figure out what the hell you're trying to pull out of this big ass file, you do need it to be pretty so that you understand what's going on. So anyway, so we're going to import JSON so we get a pretty version. IP address equals request.get ipfi.org.text, the text attribute, because we're doing the text. Again, for troubleshooting purposes, you can print out the IP address here if you need to, just to verify you're getting the external IP address. Location equals request.get, again, ip-api.com, JSON, and then that IP address we pulled in, and we are sending it through the JSON method to turn this location object into JSON so that we are able to interact with it. Then we're going to come down here. State equals location region. So again, one of the things too is, again, all these different names and things, right? So we need, when we're using the National Weather Service API, we need the 2-letter abbreviation for state, right? So region name is Florida. That's the whole name. Region is FL. That's what we need. Again, that's the kind of thing that can throw you for a loop if you're not thinking about it. Okay, so state equals location region. So that will currently get us Florida or wherever you want. Print out the state. You can use that for troubleshooting just to verify you're getting what you want. Then we're going to come down here. So weather equals, so now we're going to get the weather report, equals request.get, using the F string, basically api.weather.gov, alerts active, area equals, and we're going to plug in that state value since we're using the F string, so that's dynamic, and we're going to use .json method so that this comes back as a JSON object. Now, if you're in a state or if you don't have VPN access for whatever reason, I do have this commented out down here where you can just plug in area equals FL for Florida. So that's why this is commented out. So this is dynamic. This will work based off of your external IP address. If for some reason that's not doing what it's supposed to do, you can just run this request right here, and this will plug in for Florida. And you can manually change this, MD, NC, whatever else. If we wanted to print out the full weather, the weather thing, we could do that. Let's do that for a second just to show you how ugly it is. Let's just show you how ugly it is. Again, if we printed out the entire weather JSON object as it is without being formatted, I hit this run, and this is what we get. Again, can you imagine trying to read through this and figure out what's going on? That would suck. So we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to prettify it. So we're going to say weather underscore pretty equals JSON module dumps function, the weather, that weather JSON object, indent 2. So every time it goes down, it'll indent 2. And then we're going to print out weather underscore pretty so we get a better idea of what's going on. So we print this out. And now you can see, right, this isn't, again, this might be intimidating. Don't get me wrong, you're new. It's okay if it's intimidating. You can work through intimidating. Sometimes you can't work through just a big ass block of text. Anyways, but we can go through here, and basically this looks a lot like the web page that I was just showing you. Again, I scroll up. This is all the information for Florida. And so when we take a look at JSON, again, this is where I start talking about essentially it's like a multi-layer set. So you have a dictionary and you have lists and that type of thing in here. So we have context. So we have context at the 0 index. We have WX, we have vocab, we have type, we have features, we have IT, we have geometry, and basically it's a little bit of going through here and a little bit of trial and error to figure out what exactly it is that you need to pull out. So what we're going to be needing to pull out today is if we go down, affected areas, reference sender, what we want to be able to pull out today is headline. So we want to pull out the headlines. So again, and this is where I talk about parsing. Right? Okay, here's the headline key, and here's the headline. Here's the description key, and here's the description. Makes it pretty darn easy in order to parse. So basically we want to print out what the headline is, and what the description is, and go through. This is one thing I will tell you ChatGPT can be very useful for. One of the things I like with ChatGPT is sometimes when I need to parse data, and I'm not really quite sure how to parse it, I just dump a data file into ChatGPT and say, this is the information that I need. What request do I need to make? And many times it will give you the exact request that you need to make. So again, that's one of those things too, other than trial and error. Sometimes just dumping into ChatGPT and saying, how do I, is a good way to go. Anyways, so let's go down here. Let me just get rid of this. And so with these right here, what we're going to do is we're going to print out the first values for headline and instruction, right? So when I did that prettify for the weather, right? So we're using weather here. So we're not using weather underscore pretty. Remember, this is a string. You can't really interact with a string. We want to deal with the original JSON object that we created up here. So we're going to go to weather, features, index 0, properties, headline, and headline. And then we're going to look for instruction down here. So let me just actually print this again, just so you get an idea of what's going on here. Okay, so we're going to print this out. So this is the whole thing, right? So what we're going to do is, okay, so we're going to do weather. So weather is the entire object. So we have context. We don't want context. We want features. Okay. So weather, features, weather, so this is features, then it's colon, right? So basically this is like a dictionary. The first value is basically a list. So it's like a list in a dictionary. We have that square bracket open, and so we're going to have 0. So features at the 0 index, and then once we're in the 0 index, we're going to look and basically see how we have ID, type, geometry, properties. So properties in the same line. So weather, features, 0, properties. And then once we're in properties, we're going to be looking for 2N. And we are going to want, again, sent, effective, category. And then we have headline. So features, 0, properties, headline. So that'll get printed out. And then we also want the description. Or actually here it's the instruction. Let me just do description. It was description before at some point, so we want description, and so we then do that, right? So weather, features, 0, properties, headline, or description. Again, you might have to play with this a little bit in order to work. Now, understand with this, it's Florida, so there's a lot of crap going on in Florida. So we're going to the first item out of the alerts that are coming out. So for the first item, we're going to print the headline and the description. Any other items currently we're not going to worry about. Let me trash that. Now let me print this out. Let me not do print pretty. So we're going to do this. And so basically we can see for the first item, we have flood warning issued December 4 at 10:04 Eastern Time. By Tallahassee, Florida, and the description, minor flooding, river, so on and so forth. So basically with this right here, so this is the headline, and that got printed there, and then this is the description, and the rest of everything else down here is the description, and that's how we're able to pull that specific value. But if you're looking at this, right, and so this is at index 0, right? So these are for all of the alerts. So this will just index up. So it'll go up, it'll iterate up. So you have the first warning, and the second warning will be at the 1 index. The third warning will be at the second index, so on and so forth. So what we can actually do, if we want to show all of the alerts that are happening, is we can go down here, and we can do a 4x loop in weather features. So weather features 4x. So 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, blase, blase, blase. We are going to loop through. I'm going to do a try here. Now, again, if you're doing this in like a production environment, we would have used tries other places too. The reason that I'm doing try here is because if I'm in North Carolina, again, North Carolina doesn't have very many problems. So if I try to print something out and there's no value to print out, your script will fail, right? Again, well, remember, when we're talking about service-oriented architecture and we're talking about Python, the value of Python is being able to go out to these resources, pull information in. The problem with Python is that you get a failure. If for some reason the data isn't there for whatever reason, then the script will fail out for you. So that's why you use these try. So basically you say try to do this. If for some reason that doesn't work, except do this, and you would print out no alerts. So this is an important thing. Again, if you're in Florida, don't worry about this. You always got problems. You got so many problems. The only question is how many problems. Do you have 5 alerts? Do you have 50 alerts? And that's the only question you have. You don't have to do try. Anybody else do this try because it might be 0, right? So anyways, what this is going to do is going to try. It's going to print, and it'll say weather, print weather. 4x in weather features. So again, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Colon, we're going to print out. So this is /n, so this is just next line to give us a line cushioning. Then we have this big warning thing just so you can see each item that gets printed out. Then we're going to do x. So this x is here. So 0, iterate, 1, iterate, 2, iterate, 3, iterate until end. And then, so we're iterating through. So 0, properties, headline. 0, properties, description. Loop. 1, properties, headline. 1, properties, description. Loop. 2, properties, headline. 2, properties, description. You get the point. And so, if we then run this, we will get all the problems. Florida got all the problems, right? So we print out weather. So this just shows us a little weather app. So the first thing we have is warning. So this is the warning. Again, we have the headline, flood warning issue, December 4, and then we have the description of what that warning is. I can come down here. I see warning again. So this is useful when you're looping through, especially with these API calls, and you really don't know if you're going to get one result or 1,000 results. Having stupid things like this just to catch your eye can make it a lot easier for you to be able to read the results to verify you're getting what you're supposed to. So this is the second warning. So this would be at index 1. 0 is the first item. Index 1 is the second item. Index 2 is the third item. So this is at the second item. Flood warning, blah, blah, blah. Again, Tallahassee, Florida. What to do? Additional information. Flood warning, Melbourne, Florida. And the information. Warning, rip current for somewhere, Tallahassee, Florida, and there's the information. Flood warning for Tallahassee, and there's the information. And so with that, there are 5 or 6 different items there, and so it simply loops through and shows you all the warnings. Again, to show you that this is dynamic, let me go up to my VPN up here, and I don't know, Chicago, do you think Chicago has any issues going on right now? Who knows? All right, so we're going to go back. We are going to run this. And weather. See? Chicago has no issues, right? So again, so I'm in Chicago right now. And when I go to run this particular script, yep, you don't get anything. Let's see here. If I go up and, I don't know, somewhere else. I think Los Angeles. You think New York? New York always has problems. All right, let's see if we go and we run this for New York. There we go. So New York has some issues. Again, dynamic, weather warning, avalanche warning issued December 2nd. And you know what's going on, so forth, and so on and so forth. And so this is what's really cool, because again, I showed you before how you can output either to text or to HTML. One of the things I've talked about in the past is with API calls. You can make an API call to an SMS, basically a text messaging service. So imagine if you have this script running for your particular area. Let's say you have field technicians. Basically, you could constantly be pulling these National Weather Service alerts. Within this, if it says the county your technicians are working in, you could auto fire off an SMS message to any of your technicians out in the field saying there is a lightning storm coming. Basically, finish what it is that you're doing and come back to the office. That type of deal, right? That's the kind of thing that makes these API calls really interesting. And again, this is why service-oriented architecture gets to be just really, really, really amazing, because you have all of these resources that are now available to you that are literally an API call away. Again, back in the day, you know, when I got my MCSE back with NT 4.0, any service that you wanted, you had to build the server. It wasn't just you had to install the software. You had to physically build the server or buy it from Dell or whatever. You had to install the server software. You had to configure everything. Basically, any service you wanted your clients or your servers to be able to access, you basically had to build. Now, what's awesome is with these REST API calls and all these other API calls, all of this is just an API call away. Oh, you need your external IP address? There it is. Oh, you need the location to go with your external IP address? There it is. Oh, do you need to know weather alerts or whatever else, for your location that you were able to pull? There it is. Again, an hour at most of coding gets you what literally was pretty darn impossible not that long ago. So there you go. There was an introduction to REST APIs, the request module, and JSON in Python. And it really is both that simple and that infuriating. Again, one of the things, especially if you're new in the programming world, that you kind of got to get through your head is many times it's not really about being smart. It's about dealing with a frustration. You can know exactly what you want to do. You can know the information you want and what you want to do and everything else. But sometimes just figuring out, again, things like keys, what's the exact key that you're looking for in a JSON response can be a royal pain in the butt. So if you're going to be interacting with JSON, especially if you're pulling information out in order to feed to something else, just realize you may just have to take a couple of hours just to figure out exactly what it is you're looking for. Again, this is all formatted in such a way that once you've done it for a while, you should be able to figure out what's going on. Again, I get this JSON response back. So here's context, right? That's the first thing. I don't really care about context. Okay, so here's features, and then colon, right? So this means this anything here is a value in features. And so the value I have in features is a list. And so the first item in a list is 0. So I do features, and then that's 0. And I come down here, I don't care about ID, I don't care about type, I don't care about geometry. And then what did I say, properties? It's like, oh, okay. So then I need properties. So features, 0, properties. Okay, I don't need maybe I need the area description, right? That could be used, again, for parsing, for sending off an SMS message, something like that. Do I need a geocode? Maybe not. References, that's some information there. When the thing was sent, that might be important. Status, this is an actual thing. Severity, it's severe. Certainty is observed. Urgency is immediate. Okay, so I got the headline, so then I need to do headline. So, right? So I do weather, features, 0, properties, and then I grab headline, and then I grab description, and if you're getting frustrated, you're probably doing it right. Again, that's what differentiates technology professionals from not really technology professionals, is if you get frustrated and it annoys you so much you won't stop, you're like, I know I can solve this problem. I know I should be able to solve this problem, and I'm not solving this problem. If that makes you dig in order to find a solution, you will be a technology professional. If you sit here for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, even a couple of hours, and you're like, I know I should be able to do this, but this sucks, and then you stop, again, remember, you did not fail, you gave up. And to be clear, giving up is fine. We need chefs. We need MBAs. We need doctors. Maybe you should be a doctor instead, right? But this is the kind of thing, like, just understand when you go through like parsing text, yeah, you can be like, oh man, I know exactly what I want, but figuring out can be the pain in the butt. And that's the other thing too, is with things like institutional knowledge. So institutional knowledge basically means that people in your organization know how these types of things work. One of the things with institutional knowledge and standardization is if you have people that are used to using specific APIs, again, when you run into trouble, you can say, hey, Bob, Sue, what the hell am I doing wrong? And they go, oh, what you don't realize is you need index 3 for some reason. Like, why is that, right? But that's an important thing too. Again, I talk about that a lot with standardization. Again, when I had my tech support company, we had the employees and all that. We standardized on all of our software at the time. McAfee, I mean, you're not allowed to say that anymore. McAfee used to be. I would like to say in 2009, McAfee was still a good product. Anyways, we standardized on McAfee, we standardized on our hardware, and the reason is so that all of our employees knew the quirks. It wasn't that McAfee at the time was actually better than Norton or better than Trend Micro or the other antivirus that was out there. It was that we standardized on one antivirus product so that everybody knew how that antivirus product worked. When there was problems, and there's always going to be problems, every one of my staff could fix it in a heartbeat because they're just so used to dealing with it. Again, that's the other thing with things like API calls is when you start looking at these services, just like with Linux, anything else, there are a lot of different API services that you could use. If you're looking for the weather, there's probably 20 different API services that you can use. If you're looking for location, there's a whole bunch of location services that you can use. There are a whole bunch of different API providers out there, but again, they're all going to have their quirks so that when you're writing the Python code, right, right? You might have to do something special in there to verify that it works properly. If you, your entire team, and your company have a standardized set of APIs that you use, when, and I do mean when, you run into a really, really, really stupid problem, you can just tap somebody on the shoulder and say, what the hell am I doing wrong? Again, if you're using all kinds of different APIs from different providers, essentially to provide the exact same service, you can run into some major issues. With this, again, if you're going through and troubleshooting, if you're actually creating a full script like this, again, for troubleshooting purposes, you may need to print out the variable values to verify that you are receiving them. Make sure you're getting your IP address. Make sure that you're getting the state location, that type of thing. So print that out if you're having problems. And then the other thing is the big one is remember this prettified, the prettified JSON is a string data type, not a JSON object. So when you do this dumps, this will give you something that's easy to look at. You use that as a roadmap for when you actually query against the JSON object itself. That is one of the things that might actually throw you for a loop. And so yeah, that's about all we got for today. So as always, I enjoy teaching this class and look forward to seeing you at the next one.